maybe. Oh, there we go. There we go. It's popped up. What's up, everyone? My name is Sunny. This is the Sunny Ray Show. Today, I have with me Jessica Elerum. Did I say your last name correctly?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't butcher it. Okay, good. So, Jessica, you're calling in from where?
I'm calling in from New Zealand.
New Zealand. Oh my goodness, that's
Yeah.
like literally like what on the other side of the world. I'm calling in from Toronto. So, Jessica, thank you for being on the show. I really appreciate it. I know we were supposed to try and get it in last week. I had a little bit of a family emergency, but thank you for being patient with me. I usually kick it off with just going right into the deep end and sharing with people about the company that you're building. So, Themilia, do you want to give people kind of like the high level, the kind of like the paragraph on it? Oh, by the way, I sometimes do get interrupted by my co-host, so don't let them alarm.
Okay, no, all good. So Themilia is a custom indexing platform for cryptocurrencies. So most people are not aware that there's actually sort of upwards of 52 million, probably more cryptocurrencies in the market. And if you were to try and do fundamental or kind of desktop research on all of those to figure out what to invest in, you'd probably need another 24 hours in the day. So we came up with this concept of building a custom index, which allows you to filter the market down really quickly and efficiently into very powerful, high-performing baskets of tokens. So you can sort of get your exposure to crypto without having the hassle of doing all of that extra work required to get a good return.
Did you say 51 million tokens?
I said 52, but there's probably more. It's just, it's a huge space, and not all of those are obviously investable. So you've got to weed out the ones that are not good.
Interesting. Cool. So, I mean, I don't even know if I told you this, but I started India's first crypto exchange in December 2013. And so, UnoCoin's still serving millions of customers. So, Jessica, you grew up in Australia and ended up at the University of Sydney. What was the kid version of Jessica like? And what did you think you were going to be when you grew up?
Yeah. Well, I did spend the last sort of 17 years in Sydney, but I did grow up in New Zealand. So I'm originally a Kiwi, and kind of then went over to Aussie like we all do and sort of established myself there and finished uni there. The kid version of me probably thought she was going to be a conductor, an orchestra conductor. So I play the violin and the viola and the piano, and I really wanted to be a conductor when I was a kid.
Cool.
A little bit different.
I like that. So you said you played the violin and also, I was reading viola, the piano. So what did those disciplines teach you later that, showed up in how you build companies?
I think coordination and teamwork, right? I think if you're playing in an ensemble, it's really not about you. Obviously, you can be a solo performer and you can be the star of the show, but I really loved playing in the team version of music, which was an orchestra. And so, it's fascinating what you can do when you bring awesome people together with talents. And I think that's what really taught me. Well, that's what I transferred, I think, into building companies.
And your first role was as a business analyst at Energetics, right? A climate and energy consultancy. What did you learn? What did you learn there about how big industries actually make decisions?
Oh, I think it's very often regulation driven. I think when it came to climate and that kind of time, we're talking sort of 15, 17 years ago now, people, yes, there was a section of people that would do it because they really wanted to do it, but often it was regulatory driven. So, something had come out in legislation about energy efficiency. And so you now had to have like a neighbor's rating on your building. And that was important because it opened up channels and sales opportunities. So I think very much there is a role for government in helping to catalyze industries when there isn't necessarily a huge will to push into those industries, a huge will from the executives and teams in those industries to push into the space.
And then you joined Tyro Payments as a graduate in 2009 and stayed there more than 7 years. So what made you say yes to a fintech startup before fintech was even a word in Australia?
Yeah. Well, it's probably a little bit cliche, right? But I just thought they had cool offices. I think when I'd like, you interview at all these different places when you're a grad, and it's a little bit of a wake up call when you come out of uni. You're like, oh, this is what office life is like. And I remember going to their offices and just being, wow, it was all open plan, wooden floors, exposed brick, your classic startup cliche. And I thought, this looks like a cool place. And to be frank, I actually had really no idea what they did. It was called merchant acquiring payments. I knew nothing about that, but I just thought these seemed like cool people. So I jumped in.
Love it. And then, you moved through sales, BD, marketing, and product. So I guess my question is like, what did working across every function teach you that, you couldn't have learned if you had just remained in one lane?
Yeah. I think sales is just the best grounding for a career in business. I really will say that again and again and again to anyone that's thinking about getting into business. I think you have to have the skills at building relationships, and you have to be able to hustle and kind of, in my day, pick up the phone and give someone a call, and you don't know them from Adam, right? And convince them about something and really understand what their pain points are. So I think it's a fantastic grounding in business. You learn a lot about the product and the process. And so I think then when you translate from sales into sort of more of a product or a go-to-market role, you bring a really deep understanding of the customer with you. And if you haven't come from that background, it can be a little bit harder, not necessarily impossible, but yeah, that would be my 2 cents of wisdom.
And while you were there, you worked alongside the CEO, right, in your final year. So I guess what's the most important thing you picked up from, watching someone steer a company at that level?
Oh, yeah. Well, he is an amazing individual, Jos Stolman. He was the shadow economic minister under Gerhard Schroeder, I believe, in Germany at the time. And he had founded and run his own business and sold that, CompuNet, back in Germany. And then he had embarked with his family on a global tour of the world via boat. So they had landed in Australia. And, it was just, I think, a risk taker, a fantastic communicator, someone that could cut to the heart of the problem very quickly, that had that strategic lens on a business, and wasn't afraid to also get out there and ruffle a few feathers, but in a very in a sort of very strategic way, not sort of chest beating, but in a very clever, thought through way. And that was required, right? When you're a fintech, you're up against large incumbent banks. I'm sure it's the same in Canada, who have a chokehold on the market, and you're trying to put your position forward, convince regulators, convince the public, convince your customers, and your partners. So yeah, amazing human.
And before you ever started a company on your own, you built a writing platform on Twitter and on Daily FinTech. So why did writing matter so much to you? And like, what did that unlock?
I think for me, and I do think this is probably true of a few people, writing is a really helpful way of clarifying your thoughts. And that was what it was for me. And I was working at Tyro at the time. And so I had the beauty of being at the sort of frontier of what was happening in fintech in the Australian markets. And I could see we were doing all these really innovative things. And I was having also these ideas through interactions with other people in the ecosystem. And so I decided to write about that. And that then gave me or sort of opened all of these doors to amazing conversations, not just with people in Australia, but with people overseas, whether they were Aussie expats or just, other people from other countries who kind of picked up on what I was doing and was interested. So it became not only this great way for me to clarify my thoughts and get my ideas out there, but also to meet really interesting people. And it's taken me to places like Scotland. It's taken me to London. It's taken me to Greece. One of the women who I worked with back in that time, she ended up cheering for me at the end of the Athens Marathon when I ran that back in 2018. So yeah, amazing professional connections and friendships.
So John Holloway read your blog, invited you for coffee, and then 5 months later, you were co-founding Zuper. What
Yeah.
flipped in those 5 months?
I was probably ready. So I think I'd done the groundwork at Tyro. I'd been across many different aspects of the business, and it was just the moment to take a risk and to get uncomfortable again. And he was very convincing, as were the other co-founders. And I was just like, yeah, I'm ready to sink my teeth into something that, I don't know what the outcome will be. And yeah, I jumped in.
That's awesome. So you've also said that superannuation in 2017 reminded you of payments in 2007. So, can you like what did you see that the incumbents missed essentially?
It was really digital transformation. And it sounds so obvious now, right? Because there's really very few businesses that don't have a strong digital footprint, an app of some sort, especially if you're in the finance sector. But at that time, that had not happened in superannuation at all. And if it had, it very much happened around the fringes, or the execution of it was very, very poor. And you had to really understand why that was, in terms of understanding the cultural dynamic of the industry. It was a quasi government instituted, program that obviously had some degree of, like, I guess, wanting to be better, but didn't really need to be better. They existed. They got given customers through legislative arrangements, so they didn't really need to fight to win or keep their customers. The money was going to keep flowing in, and so I think you could see parallels to that to say the incumbents when it came to payments. It was like you had to have an FPOS terminal, you had to have a payment facility, and you just had to take what you were given pretty much from the banks. And superannuation was a little bit like that. There was some parallels there. And what you were starting to see happen was disruption, therefore, around that, because people wanted more. People were hungry for more. And if you were able to serve them up a much better digital experience, that really spoke to the younger generations.
And then Zuper was acquired in 2019. What does the first exit actually feel like, and what did it teach you? What did it teach you about building the next one?
Yeah, the first exit came a lot sooner than any of us had really thought. But I think what it taught me was, when you are willing to go out on a limb and build something before maybe the industry is ready to build it themselves, you can get yourself in a really interesting strategic position, because suddenly the industry does wake up and they're looking for solutions to that problem. And it's a kind of a build by partner conversation a lot of the time. And you can be potentially in that buy category. And so we were open to that. We started fielding offers. We had 5 different offers at the time, and we decided to go with the buyer that we chose ultimately, because of a lot of different synergies and what they were looking to do and their vision in the space. So it taught me it's good to be just ahead of the curve or just ahead of the wave as it's breaking. I'm not a surfer, but I live by the beach, and I've come from living in Sydney, near Bondi. So you need to be able to be ready to catch that break. And then when you can ride that break, other people will sort of wish they were there with you or try and get on it.
What so a lot of people in traditional finance, people find like kind of bounce off of crypto because of the noise and the scams. What let you see past that to the kind of the infrastructure underneath it?
I think I have a desire for structure. I really like order. And, I'm that type of person that needs to have a clean house or a clean kitchen before I can sit down to do any work. Chaos is just a bit of an anathema to me. And I think this space obviously does feel very chaotic to a lot of people, and it keeps people out of it. And, I just felt like, what if you could bring more structure to this space? What if you could actually give people a clean framework to start with? And off the back of the work that I'd been doing at Zuper, where we'd been building investment portfolios for superannuation using index funds and ETFs, it just struck me that wasn't really possible in crypto in the same way, and that was a problem that needed to be solved. And so when I started to do some original research in that space, there were some activity happening predominantly in the decentralized space, so in the kind of more on-chain environment. But I realized that wasn't really going to play well into sort of your average consumer that wanted to participate. So really it came down to, how can we collate and structure this space for people who want to enter, to make it easier to enter, to make it safer to enter, and to ultimately give them a much more powerful return, a better return than what they would get today, which is just really just throwing darts at different coins on an exchange. And yeah, I felt like, not to sort of say that's what happens for everybody, but when you talk to most people, their experience is, I opened an exchange account, I bought some Bitcoin, and then I got interested in a few other things. My mate told me about this, or the exchange just said this is listed. But really, that's a bit of a losing game these days. So you need that structure, and you need that filter on the market to create something more investable.
Yeah, that makes yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I've seen that. So what is one belief you held strongly in fintech that Web3 forced you to throw out?
Ooh. I think, in fintech, it's a lot more traditional, right? You go through a traditional pathway of
Hey,
potentially.
Jessica, will you hate me if I take a bite of my food? I haven't eaten all day. I'm like fasting. Yeah, okay, so keep talking, but just wanted to get your permission before. It's like, oh my
Not
God, is this guy
all.
actually eating Thai curry right now?
Eat, eat, need to eat. We've all got to eat. So yeah, I think in fintech, you tend to be funneled down a very traditional path, right? And it's because that's the path that's available to. Maybe you bootstrap the business, maybe you then raise some angel or seed capital, maybe you then go to venture. I think when it comes to crypto, you can potentially throw that all away because you can just go straight to the crypto market and you can create community and capital at the same time. And I think that's something that in the traditional fintech world is a little bit more challenging. You can maybe still do it, but you don't really get to bring your customers on as owners of your product on that journey in the same way that you can in crypto. And I think that's been one of the most powerful disruptions and innovations of the crypto market.
Yeah, yep. So let's just maybe switch gears a little bit. I was going to ask you, so when you decided to build Familia, instead of taking, on another operating role, what was the conversation with yourself like that you were having that sealed the deal?
Uh, well, it's myself and my co-founder, Kent, who's also my partner. So that's sort of helpful. We could have that conversation together about how we were going to build the business up from scratch, what the path we wanted to take. He's a quantitative analyst and trader by background. So he brings, that skill set to the business, whereas I bring more business development, growth, marketing, and funds management experience. So we have a really complementary skill set, which is nice. We decided that we wanted to bootstrap for as long as we could. And I think that was both for us coming out of experiences working in venture-backed startups, and we just wanted to do it differently this time. And we were in a sort of financial position where we could, which was nice. And we wanted to leave ourselves open to being able to explore a more crypto orientated pathway versus say a more traditional, VC pathway. So, I think we had that conversation and then we were like, well, we're going to need to build a team at some point. This is going to get beyond just us. And so we just structured, a pretty simple but powerful ESOP arrangement with our team. And we've been able to sort of build a team of contributors who predominantly work for us on an equity basis. And so that's been a great way for us to bring people on the journey who are true believers and build a really strong foundational team. So now we're at a bit of an inflection point. We're in market, we're growing, we're acquiring customers, we're about to launch our new product, which is a house index. And it's really at that point where we're nailing distribution or trying to nail distribution. That's that final leg in the startup's journey.
So if you don't mind, maybe explain Familia in one paragraph, right? To somebody who's like a traditional investor, somebody who's never, bought a token in their life.
Yeah, it's an index product. So if you've bought an ETF or an index product, it's a little bit like a DIY ETF builder, but rather than that being wrapped in a fund structure, we actually connect to your exchange account and we allow you to buy all of those underlying holdings in your existing exchange account. So you keep custody of all of those assets, and then we're just sort of a plug and play into that account and we rebalance that for you. So if you're familiar with index funds and ETFs, generally people understand that analogy.
Do you use their API key or something?
Yeah, well, a lot of the exchanges now have an OAuth connection, which is sort of a little bit more secure,
Oh,
and we use that. So
okay.
yeah, we're OAuthed into OKX, Binance, Coinbase, the majors. So as long as you've got an account with them, you can just come and connect with us and buy your index.
So your co-founder Kent ran a hedge fund right before moving into portfolio management. How do your two operating systems combine, and where do you argue? I know you touched on it a little bit in terms of your more BD, but can you go in a little bit deeper into that?
Yeah, just over the kitchen, Sunny. Who's
Yeah.
No, we're pretty good on that. So yeah, he is the deep analytical mind. He is very mathematical in how he thinks, and that's his background. So he obviously has a very detailed risk framework and mindset. So his responsibility in the business has been building the index methodology, building the logic that sits behind the indexing infrastructure, which is core to our business and has to be, 100% spot on and right and accurate and all of those wonderful financial things. So that's where he sits in the business. He's also a software engineer, so he runs our engineering team of sort of 4 devs. He's also doing development work himself, but predominantly he's building that indexing logic. I'm more sitting at the front of house, so talking to the market, thinking about what our distribution strategies will be, crafting some of the messaging, and all the other boring operating stuff that no one really likes to talk about but still has to get done. And do we complement? No,
Yeah.
we work really well together. We're very complementary, and so it's nice to be able to just sort of bounce ideas off each other. We will drop into each other's domains. We will problem solve together. I think you have to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, my wife's been my biggest supporter on this crypto journey. And I can, attest to the fact that when you have someone beside you that's like aligned at that level, it's definitely a superpower. So you mentioned, right, there's 52 million tokens out there, and most of them, as you've also noticed, go to zero. So how does Themilia actually filter for the ones with like staying power and before they have already made their move, right? Like, how do you even figure that out? It's not easy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not easy. So we whittle down that 52 million to just over 3,000. And the way we do that is we apply a global filter to get into what we call our universe of a minimum market cap of $1 million and a minimum daily traded volume of 100,000. So that immediately sort of concentrates out of that broad pool of tokens into those that actually have some investability. Now, those parameters are probably still too wide for a lot of people, but that's our starting point. And then when you come into our platform, you'll see 40 different filters that can be combined into infinite ways, and you can then narrow that even further. So you might say, well, I'm really interested in AI agent tokens built on the Solana blockchain with a minimum market cap of 100 million and at least $1 million worth of daily traded volume. That's sort of my sweet spot where I want to play. Then you can then craft that and chart that index and say compare it to Bitcoin or compare it to its cohort on Ethereum, AI agents built on Ethereum with the same criteria. And so you can keep refining that process, but do it very quickly till you're actually able to identify a chart profile that actually really appeals to you. And so you're getting to the point where maybe you are able to spot a breakout on the chart, or maybe you are actually able to see, actually I can see a clear persistent trend here that's, on a time frame I'm comfortable with. So it's a discovery tool first and foremost. Now, one of the things we've learned being in market is that really appeals to people who have a sense of where they want to discover, someone that comes in with a little bit of knowledge and likes to play around. There's another cohort of people that are predominantly, I would say, outside of crypto right now that don't really know where to start when they're given a filtering tool. And so that led us to build what we're calling our house index. And the house index is a collaboration between analysts that use our platform that have deep insights into the market, very good at token selection, very good at using the filters and kind of timing the market, understanding when a breakout might be occurring. They provide their sort of token selections and indexing charts, and we then ensemble that in a quant model underneath the hood to then develop what we call the house index. And so the house index will become just one index that is kind of built on the insights and intelligence of people in the market who have done that filtering step for you. And so that will be a bit more of a flagship product for the general market.
That's interesting. That's super interesting. Cool. So you guys draw a sharp line between static and dynamic indexing. So why does that distinction matter so much in a market that, changes narratives almost every quarter?
Yeah. I think you've explained it yourself really in the question. The narratives change so frequently, even faster than on a quarterly basis. And if you look at a typical index, if you took the standard way indexes are constructed in traditional finance, you might be only revisiting the constituents of that index on a quarterly basis. In crypto, you probably need to do that a lot sooner because of the speed at which things move in crypto, the speed at which new things emerge. You want to capture that into your index, and the speed at which things can implode. You want to get those out of your index and kind of not have exposure to them. So we think that you need a much more dynamic approach to how you not only construct an index, but also how you maintain and manage that index. And you really can't be waiting for an investment committee to meet once a quarter, or half a year to then decide what the constituents should be in that index product.
Got it. So less than 0.1% of the crypto market, is currently invested through indexes, compared to arguably the majority of capital in traditional finance, right? So
Yeah.
what does that gap tell you about where this is all going?
It's got two angles to it, I think. One, I think it's been really difficult to index the market. So I think, that's part of what we're solving is we actually create an infrastructure where you can do that. But two, it's a huge opportunity, right? Because indexing and ETFs, they've been probably one of the most standout innovations in traditional finance over the past 40 years. They have just become to dominate the sector over and above active management because they're efficient. They give you the return of the market, which is often far better than what the active manager on the whole can deliver to you. So they've become incredibly popular. The challenge, I think, in transporting the ideology of indexing into crypto is that in traditional markets, what you're doing when you're buying an index is you're buying exposure to the market because you believe the market on the whole will go up. And you might say get an index in the S&P 500. But what you sort of don't think about when you buy that index is to get into the S&P 500, you're not a startup anymore. You had to traverse the valley of death. You had to, raise enough capital. You had to earn revenue for the most part, and you had to then go through a very tight listing process. So you're really looking at the cream of the crop of, say, US businesses when you look at the S&P 500. When people look at crypto and they think, oh, I'll just get some market exposure, what they don't realize is there's an incredibly high failure rate in crypto markets. There are some standout performers, but since about 2004, you've actually had this quite sharp diversion in the market between, say, Bitcoin and the rest of the market on a whole on an equal weight basis. So why is that? Well, it's because you're not looking at companies that are mature, that have gone through the valley of death. You're looking at companies that are effectively startups. They're all looking for product market fit. And the dynamics of the crypto market are more than just that. They're also looking for regulatory fit. They're looking for so much more. And there's a cultural dynamic at play. And so to say, I just want exposure to the crypto market like I have exposure to the US stock market isn't a good Coloroy. You need to be a lot clearer about which part of the market you want exposure to in crypto. And so I think there's that tension, I think, about what indexing is in traditional finance and then just transporting that across to crypto. It won't work at the moment in that way. So you have to be a better filter.
So the house index is your own curated portfolio built from vetted analysts and agents. If it consistently beats just holding Bitcoin, what does that change about how people enter the market?
Yeah, well, that is the aim of the house index. We want to deliver the best risk-adjusted return possible. We all know that from traditional finance, it being concentrated on one asset is a lot riskier than being diversified across, say, a basket of assets. You are exposed to what happens with that asset. And so that's, part of why we also believe there's value there in that diversification and risk piece. But yeah, I think crypto is an interesting market because a lot of people start with Bitcoin. You don't really go into other markets and start on the whole. Everyone starts with one particular stock, for example. People usually go in and have some diversified exposure. Not everyone goes into Microsoft on day one as their first pick. But in crypto, a lot of people start with Bitcoin. Everybody usually holds a little bit of Bitcoin. So it would be sort of, I think, a success for us if we were able to capture that market coming into this space and saying, well, you can just do that, but there's probably a better alternative now that might have made sense 3 or 4 years ago. But now maybe you want to think about it a little bit differently. And so when you're sitting back and looking at your discretionary investment portfolio and you want a 3 to 4% allocation to crypto, we would like to be able to up there showing that, this would be better than you put it in the house index rather than in Bitcoin alone.
Have you back tested some of this though? Like, have you tried to see, hey, look, if we would have done this 6 years ago, then people would in fact have been better off? Because I mean, because it's not easy to beat Bitcoin, right? Like
Yeah.
it's like the new hurdle rate essentially, and it always has been.
Yeah.
And this is coming from somebody who had a front row seat to seeing Ethereum be born. I'm from Toronto. Vitalik literally
Yeah.
wrote the code in front of my face, which is it is the second biggest crypto asset, and it's kind of given life to so many others. But I can't help but feel that it's a tall order, no, to try and beat the Bitcoin hurdle rate. Like, how do you even think through that from like a first principles perspective?
Yeah, I think you've got to pick the time frame you're looking over, right? And I think there was a period where it made a lot of sense to just be in Bitcoin, and you were talking about that, and that's not incorrect. There was a time where that was the premier asset. Arguably today it still is the premier asset in the space, but it is down sort of 12% over the last 365 days. And a lot of people, that's a fairly painful position to be in, especially if you've come in and bought these Bitcoin ETFs and that's been your first exposure to the asset. You weren't there for the hyper growth stage sort of 4, 5, 6 years ago, even further back. So I think it's about understanding the market today that you're operating in is different to the market that, say, you, Sunny, were operating in and a lot of your crypto peers when you first got exposure to Bitcoin. And there's different regulatory risks, there's different geopolitical risks, there's different cultural risks, there's different technology risks. And that market isn't static, or those conditions aren't static. So yes, when you come to look at what you invest in right now, maybe it's Bitcoin, but maybe it's not. And I think, the maybe it's not is probably gaining a little bit more momentum. Not to say that it wouldn't be part of your portfolio, but just saying like what else should be in there to sort of buffer some of those risks of maybe Bitcoin not performing the way it has into the future like it has in the past.
Yeah. Anyways, I think we could do a whole episode probably on just going back and forth on that. But let's help me land the plane. Yeah, 5 years out, what does Thamelia look like if you've done your job right, and what does the crypto investing landscape look like?
5 years out, I think we are a fundamental building block of a crypto portfolio. We might not be your entire holding, but we might form a nice foundational holding that you can lean back on and then be a little bit more exotic on top of that if you so wish. And I would like to think that we've brought people into this space in a sort of more structured way where they feel confident in the decisions they've made rather than it's just play money and it doesn't matter what happens to it. I do feel like this is contributing to the overall health of my portfolio. It's got a place, it's found its slot. So I think that would be success. Was there another question?
What's your website? Where do people tap into your, I don't know, stream of consciousness? Do you blog on LinkedIn, or where's the best place for people to find you?
Yeah, so jump onto thamelia.co. So that's .co, thamelia.co. And we have a weekly newsletter. So that would be our stream of consciousness. And we also run a podcast, and you can find all of that on our website.
Awesome. Hey, what does Thamelia mean?
It's actually a Greek word. It means foundations. So it means the kind of foundations of something, and traditionally a building, but yeah, Greek originally.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your time. Thank you for tuning in. And I got little guy crawling around here. So yeah, it's probably my my cue here. Thamelia, Jessica, thank you so much for sharing about Thamelia. And yeah, we'll catch up with everyone on the next one. But Jessica, hang back for like 1 minute. I'll bring the stream to an end. Take care, everyone.